Are the Miami Dolphins actually in on potentially drafting Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders in the first round of the NFL Draft? I did not think this was a possibility for Miami, but there might be a pathway here. I'm Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. With Shedeur, I always thought he was going to be a top 5 pick, but it sounds like Cleveland's not that interested. New York isn't going to go with him at number 3. And if that's not the case, there's a world he slides out the top 10 if the Saints don't draft him at 9, because it doesn't seem like the Raiders want him at 6 either. And Adam Schefter, the ESPN NFL insider, didn't rule out the possibility of him getting drafted by Chris Greer and the Dolphins at pick 13. Schefter said on a podcast earlier this week, saying that after this year, there is a way out of that Tua contract. With the health questions, maybe. I'm not telling you that they are doing it. We're talking and imagining. I'm not completely dismissing it. Shedeur Sanders to the Dolphins, that is, he's talking about. And this is very, very interesting because in this podcast Schefter was on, he was mentioning a lot of different possibilities where Miami goes Shedeur goes somewhere not expected. Dolphins at 13. I saw him talk about the Cardinals and other picks in the early 20s, maybe like the Pittsburgh Steelers. But for Miami to be grouped in to a possible Shedeur Sanders slide and then they draft them, it fascinates me. So I want to look at him as a prospect and talk about the idea of drafting him. But before I get into him as a prospect, claim your side. Let it be known. If Shedeur Sanders on draft night in late April is on the board at pick number 13, would you select the Colorado quarterback? Type D for draft, type P for pass. Let me know your thoughts down below. And stick around because coming up at the back end of today's show, I am going to give you my official answer, but I did want to look at him as a prospect and the potential fit and his long-term projection before I gave you my official answer. But this is a QB who has shown a lot at the college level, right? He's been a long-term starter, started at Jackson State, spent some time at Colorado, and he improved from 23 to 24, right? The completion percentage went up, passing yards went up, touchdowns went up, turnovers did a little bit, but that's all right because he took more chances. He pushed the ball downfield more. And I thought you did see growth from last year to this year in terms of Shedeur Sanders in the Big 12 at the college level. And the part that's so fascinating about Sanders as a prospect is that, to me, when he's got time to throw, he's got a good pocket around him, he is absolutely lethal. You look at those numbers when he's kept clean last year at Colorado, and that was always the issue with the Buffaloes, right? Their offensive line was terrible. It wasn't good. So when he was kept clean, he was great. An 81% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and did not have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. Now, those numbers will obviously decrease and increase in terms of turnover-worthy plays when under pressure. It's just easy. It's not as easy, but the part that impresses me is that he is quick, decisive with the football, because you see the two numbers at the bottom, when blitzed and not blitzed. When he's blitzed, he actually gets the ball out of his hands quickly and doesn't have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. So when he is decisive and makes his reads and hits his back foot, gets the ball out of his hands, I think Sanders is a really good quarterback prospect. And in a Dolphin system that really isn't predicated on going through a ton of reads. Obviously, it's very helpful, but when you think of the Dolphins, ideally, when you go through that motion and you go through the system, the RPO scheme, you're hitting your back foot and you're getting out of the ball of your hands quickly to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle and letting them do the work after the play. A lot of screens, a lot of end arounds, pocket or RPOs over the middle of the field, slants. Like, that's the type of stuff that Miami runs a lot. And I think Shedeur Sanders is actually a really good fit for the Dolphins, and there's a reason why we'll get to in a little bit. But when speaking on Shedeur Sanders as an NFL draft prospect, I like to look at what would have happened last year. And listen, this is me, and it's just me. This is not what people have said in consensus, but if you took my QB rankings in the NFL draft from last year, and then you incorporate the two top quarterbacks in this draft, in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, to me, this is how it would have played out. Last year, I had Caleb 1, Drake May 2, Jane Daniels 3, Penix 4, JJ 5, and Bo Nix 6. Obviously, all 6 won in the first round, all won in the top half of that draft, and Bo Nix performed expectations in my mind. So this is my rankings from last year. And if you took my evaluations of Cam Ward as a Hurricane this past year, Shedeur Sanders as a Colorado Buffalo, I would have had Shedeur higher than Bo Nix last year. So this isn't revisionist history. Like, that's how I would have felt compared to Sanders as a prospect to Bo Nix. And that's where I have Cam Ward as well. So to me, there is a world, and there is, to me, I would have taken Shedeur last year probably inside the top 20, 25 of the first round. Same thing would have been said for JJ, Penix, and the rest. Like, I didn't even think Bo Nix was that crazy of a first-round prospect last season. He proved me wrong, but that's how I feel on these specific 8 quarterbacks coming out as draft prospects. And I want to look at the good and bad of Shedeur Sanders coming up in just a second. But make sure you do subscribe to the channel, because here at Dolphins Today, we will be live for all 3 days of the NFL Draft. First round, second round, third, or day 2, day 3. That's the way it should be said. So hit that sub button, because we'll be here for live analysis and coverage of every Dolphins draft pick. And when you look at the good for Shedeur Sanders in terms of a scouting report, we talked about the under pressure. He's tough as hell. He stays in the pocket and he delivers. And he had to be, because we talked about it, how bad that Colorado offensive line was. There was tons of pressure in his grill and his face at all times. So he had to make the most of a not good circumstance. I think he's a very accurate quarterback. We talked about that's important in a Dolphin system. And it's not just accuracy, it's ball placement, because I think it's different. You could be accurate and throw it on your wide receiver and give your guy a chance, but the ball placement is different with Shedeur, whether it's a back shoulder, hitting your wide receiver in stride. That's something that he does at an exceptionally high level. The experience starting is also very beneficial. 4 years split between Jackson State and Colorado. And I think that he gets a actually underrated rap in terms of his athletic ability. He's not the most absurd athlete, but he is someone who can evade pressure, scramble, get outside the pocket, make plays with his legs, extend plays, but also get past the line of scrimmage and run for 8, 10, 15 yards. I think it's a part of his game that doesn't get talked about enough. So Shedeur is good. Now with the bad, though, because he's not a perfect prospect, he lacks those game-changing traits. He does not have a rocket of an arm. He is not an absurd athlete like a Jalen Milroe, who ran, in the 4.3s at the 40-yard dash at his Alabama Pro Day. And we talked about when he gets the ball out of his hands quickly, he's decisive, he's accurate, he's elite. But sometimes he just tries to go for the big plays. He hunts those. He holds onto the ball too long, and that's a concern. I also think the ceiling on Shedeur isn't that high due to the lack of those game-changing traits. And then there is the off-the-field kind of concern, not of him as a person, but he is such a celebrity almost. Will that cause distractions in your locker room? That's something that seriously has to be considered. We're going to continue to talk about Shedeur here in just a second, but we are sponsored by Game Time, the official ticketing partner of Dolphins Today. When I get my tickets, whether it's sporting event, comedy show, concert, I get it with Game Time. And with the MLB in full swing, that is how I get my tickets. We live in Dallas, go to some Rangers games, but if you're in Miami, you can go to some Marlins games. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for any type of event. Like I mentioned, whether it's sports, concerts, comedy, theater, or anything else. They have Game Time picks, which make last-minute ticket buying easier than ever. They quickly highlight the best deals in the stadium, so you get your tickets very, very easily. All-in pricing, another feature I love, toggling it, shows the total price of your ticket up front. So there's no surprise fees at checkouts. You can go see the Marlins. You can so see the Heat, the Panthers, as they're still playing in their respective sports. You can also get your tickets for concerts over the summer, whether it's Lady Gaga, Chris Brown coming in June. And there's so many options that you can have for Game Time, which is why it's the best ticketing app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, when you get back to thinking about Shedeur Sanders, I like Shedeur Sanders as a prospect. Even if he slid to the Dolphins at 13, I don't think the Dolphins regime has the green light to take a top quarterback. Seriously, when you think outside, take away the player, take away the just other things here. When you draft a rookie quarterback, you give your GM a new lifetime or a lifeline, if you will. Same thing with your head coach, because you're not going to fire them a year after taking the rookie quarterback unless they are that atrocious. You're going to give them 2-3 years to see how they play out with that specific quarterback. So, does the ownership of Miami have the patience to give Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel another 2 to 3 years with Shedeur Sanders if they move on from Tua and decide Shedeur is the replacement for Tua moving forward? Like, I don't know if that is something Stephen Ross is going to allow them to do. But also, I don't think Shedeur Sanders as a prospect and his ceiling is that much better than Tua Tagovailoa, if better at all. When you look at the two QBs, they are very similar. And we talked about the top traits and the positives of Sanders. Those are all the same positives that Tua had coming out of Alabama. The negatives are the exact same as well. This has been a common comparison as Shedeur Sanders has been continuously scouted. And Dan Orlovsky hopped on ESPN and comped Shedeur Sanders to Tua Tagovailoa. He said specifically that Tua is my comp. In many ways, great ball placement, rhythm and timing, super smart. That's the type of QB that Sanders is, and unfortunately for the Dolphins fans at home who might like Shedeur Sanders and hate Tua, well, you might have to just look in the mirror, because I do think the similarities are there in a lot of ways. But let me know your thoughts. What say you? Is Tua a good comp for Shedeur Sanders? Limited arm talent, accurate, decisive, a decent athlete, but not crazy? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Type Y for yes or type N for no. As you might have been able to tell here over the last couple of seconds, but yeah, I do think that is the case. When you think of Tua as a quarterback, his arm strength limitates him in cold weather and throwing the ball really downfield. And I don't think Sanders is limited in terms of his ability to throw the ball down the football field, but if he were to play in late November, mid-December in Foxborough, Massachusetts, Buffalo, New York, Kansas City, when it's 15 degrees outside, is he going to be able to pierce the wind with his throws over the middle of the field, launch it deep 55, 60 yards downfield, and hit Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle in stride? Because that's what Tua struggles with. I don't know if Shedeur Sanders would be able to have that ability. So I teased it earlier. My official answer: Shedeur Sanders, if he's available at pick number 13, if I'm the Dolphins, I'm still not drafting him. Listen, I think Sanders is a good prospect. I think he's got a lot of good things going for him. But he is too similar to Tua. I don't think his ceiling is higher than Tua in a big way, if we're going to be honest. And this regime needs to win now. They don't get another 2 to 3 years to work with Sanders. They need to figure out corner, defensive line, offensive line, safety. So even if Sanders miraculously slips through the cracks to pick number 13, it would be in the best interest for this Dolphins front office to pass on Sanders, go with one of those 4 positions of need, or maybe, in a different scenario, trade back with a team looking to move up at number 13 to draft Sanders. But if I'm Miami, I'm keeping my hands clean of Sanders, not because I don't think he's a good prospect, just because I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And if you are going to replace Tua Tagovailoa, I'm thinking much bigger, folks. I am. I mentioned it. The same limitations that Tua has is similar to Shedeur Sanders. So if you are going to move on from Tua, let's get a big, strong arm, athletic quarterback. Like, think of the Jaden Daniels, the Caleb Williams, the Drake May. Those guys are elite QB prospects. That's why they went 1, 2, and 3 last year, and they all have great promise in this league. It's because they're mobile, they've got strong arms, but they also know how to play in structure at times. I think Shedeur plays in structure well. Outside of structure, that's where the questions come in. The arm talent, the questions come in. If I am replacing Tua Tagovailoa, I want a quarterback that can, quote, compete in the arms race of a Mahomes, of a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson. Like, I want one of those guys. I know it can still happen with pocket QBs that aren't having the strongest arms like Joe Burrow, but you have to be so elite in your accuracy, ball placement, and processing, and those things come into question a little bit more than the physical traits that some of these other QB prospects have. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Dolphins Today. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we're continuing to bring you content every single day. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be live for every single day of the NFL Draft surrounding the Miami Dolphins. So subscribe now.